No one could remember the last time the air in Blanco, Texas was this hot. Even the old-timers on their weathered benches at the back of the auction house said the heat was a warning. Inside, the barn pulsed with the noise of boots, the sharp tang of hay, sweat, and horses, dozens of heads tossing in nervous confusion as they waited for their fates. Evelyn Monroe felt every eye on her the moment she stepped onto the dusty auction floor. 51 years old, her hair shot with silver, the lines on her face carved by both grief and hard work. She stood out among the rough-faced ranchers and fast-talking traders. Some remembered her as a nurse, others as the wife of the late Jack Monroe, a good man taken too soon, leaving her to run their small, crumbling ranch alone. Most these days just saw her as another stubborn woman who didn't know when to quit. She felt it all, the pity, the ridicule. But she kept her head high, ignoring the whispered judgments and the half-smothered laughter as she walked down the rows of horses. At the very end, away from the better-stocked pens, she stopped. There he was, a chestnut gelding, maybe 5 or 6 years old, his coat ragged, a web of scars crisscrossing his flank. His left eye, rimmed in white, watched her with a look she recognized. Raw terror wrapped around a tiny, desperate hope. The auctioneer's assistant sneered. "You want to see that one? He's damaged goods, lady. Not worth a dime. Last owner said he spooks at his own shadow." Evelyn took a slow breath. "Open the gate, please." She stepped inside. The horse, trembling, flattened himself against the far wall, snorting, his entire body taut with dread. The other buyers watched, amused. Someone muttered, "She'll get herself trampled." Evelyn crouched, making herself small. She reached into her pocket for a sugar cube. "Easy. Easy now. I know you're scared. So am I." For a long moment, nothing happened. The horse watched her, muscles quivering. Finally, he inched forward, nostrils flaring, until his lips brushed her palm. The connection was fragile, but real. "I'll take him," she said, standing. Her voice didn't shake. The room erupted in jeers and disbelief. "You're wasting your money, Monroe. That horse is cursed. Should have spent it on groceries." Evelyn ignored them all, pulling her last envelope of savings from her worn leather bag. The auctioneer's gavel came down, the deal sealed. The gelding, his paperwork tagged with the name Crimson, was hers. Getting him into the trailer was another battle. Crimson balked at the ramp, eyes wild, trying to pull free. One man yelled, "Want us to put him down for you? It'd be kinder." Evelyn snapped, "He's not yours. Stand back." It took half an hour and every ounce of patience she had. Sweat dripped down her neck, soaking her old denim shirt. Finally, with slow coaxing and the promise of a carrot, Crimson stepped up and into the trailer, sides heaving, flanks wet with fear. The drive home was slow, the old truck rattling over every rut in the country road. Evelyn kept glancing at the rearview mirror, heart pounding. Was she doing the right thing? Was this another reckless choice, just like Claire always said? For a second, she almost wished Jack was there to tell her she was being foolish, or to tell her she was brave. Halfway home, Crimson started to stagger. Evelyn pulled over on the side of a deserted stretch, heart hammering. She threw open the trailer, and her breath caught. Crimson was down, legs tucked under him, chest heaving. "No, no, no. Stay with me, please." She climbed into the cramped trailer, heedless of the risk. The horse rolled his eye at her, terrified, foam at his lips. Evelyn pressed her hand to his neck, feeling the frantic pulse. She fumbled for the water jug, uncapped it, and poured a little onto her palm. "Here." Take it easy. We'll go slow. You're safe now. A pair of ranchers pulled over, curious. You need a hand, Monroe? Looks like you got more trouble than you bargained for. One of them shook his head. That horse should have gone to the meat man. Evelyn squared her shoulders. You don't get to decide that. Not today. Slowly, Crimson lifted his head, nudging her with a shuddering sigh. She kept whispering, pouring what was left of the water into a battered bucket. He drank, finally, his sides shuddering. The sun was setting by the time they made it home. Evelyn unloaded Crimson herself, leading him gently into the old barn that had once been full of life and laughter. He limped, favoring his right front leg, but followed her step by step. Inside, she shut the door on the world's voices. Crimson stared at her, trembling. Evelyn set down her bag, leaning against the stall door. We're both a little broken, huh? But you're not alone. Not anymore. She wiped the sweat from her face, fighting tears that threatened to spill. Outside, a mockingbird called as dusk settled over the dry Texas fields. The ranch was quieter than ever, and lonelier too. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, hope flickered in the darkness. She would not abandon Crimson, no matter what it cost her, no matter what anyone else said. Evelyn woke before dawn, the familiar ache of exhaustion tugging at her bones. The night before, she'd barely slept, her dreams haunted by memories of Jack and the uncertain eyes of the new horse in her barn. She pulled on a faded shirt and jeans, slipped on her boots, and made her way outside, breathing in the sharp, earthy scent of Texas morning. Crimson was standing in his stall, battered but alert, ears flicking as she approached. Evelyn checked his wounds, offered him a gentle pat, then moved through her routine, feeding, watering, moving quietly so as not to startle him. She let the silence of the barn wash over her, finding comfort in the rhythm of work. The morning sun was just cresting the horizon when Evelyn heard the crunch of tires on gravel. She paused, heart tightening. Visitors were rare these days. She wiped her hands on her jeans and stepped out onto the porch, shading her eyes against the light. A battered sedan rolled to a stop. The driver's door slammed, and there she was, Claire Monroe, her only daughter, standing at the edge of the yard. 23, city thin and city tough, her hair pulled back in a messy knot, eyes flashing with a complicated mix of anger, pride, and something Evelyn hadn't seen in years. Hurt. They stared at each other for a long moment. The distance between them seemed impossibly wide. You gonna invite me in? Or just let me fry out here? Evelyn tried to steady her voice. Come on inside, coffee's on. Claire shouldered a duffel bag, walked up the steps without a word. Inside, the house felt smaller than Evelyn remembered, full of ghosts and the scent of strong coffee. Claire dropped her bag with a thud. I heard you bought another lost cause at the auction, Claire said, voice sharp. Didn't think you could afford groceries, let alone a horse nobody wanted. Evelyn poured coffee, set a cup in front of her daughter. It's none of your business how I run this place. Claire scoffed. It's my business when you blow the last of Dad's money on a broken-down animal. God, Mom, do you even listen to yourself? The words stung, sharper because they were true. For a second, Evelyn saw her younger self in Claire's scowl, the same stubborn set to the jaw, the same fire in her eyes. Why are you here, Claire? Her daughter shrugged, looked away. Guess I ran out of things to lose in Dallas. Lost my job, lost my apartment, boyfriend's gone. Figured maybe you needed help, Or maybe I just needed somewhere to land. Don't get used to it." The silence stretched between them. Evelyn wanted to reach out, say something comforting, but the words felt clumsy and foreign. They spent the afternoon in uneasy truce. Claire stomped through the house, complaining about the dust, the cracked paint, the faded photographs still hanging on the walls. Evelyn went back to the barn, checking on Crimson, scrubbing buckets, losing herself in chores. Late in the afternoon, Claire wandered into the barn. She stood outside Crimson's stall, arms crossed. "So this is the famous rescue, huh? He looks like hell." Evelyn didn't look up. "He's got more fight in him than most people give him credit for." Claire snorted. "If you say so." She reached out tentatively, but Crimson shied away, nostrils flaring. Claire jerked her hand back. "Figures. Even the animals around here hate me." Evelyn wanted to argue, but instead she just sighed, tired all the way down to her bones. The day faded into an uneasy evening. Evelyn made a simple dinner: beans, cornbread, a handful of tomatoes from the garden. They ate in silence, the only sound the ticking of the old kitchen clock. Night crept in. The cicadas started up their chorus, and a heavy heat settled over the house. Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound from Claire's room. She heard nothing but the distant, restless movement of Crimson in his stall. Then, a crash. Evelyn bolted upright, heart pounding. Another crash, louder, from the direction of the barn. She scrambled for her boots, grabbed the heavy flashlight by the door. Claire was already in the hallway, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" "Stay inside," Evelyn whispered, but Claire followed her anyway. They crept out into the night, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The barn door stood open, swinging wildly in the wind. Inside, shadows flickered across the walls. Someone was there. 2 figures, hoods up, moving fast. "Get out!" Evelyn shouted. The intruders spun, one brandishing a crowbar. Evelyn's hands shook, but she stood her ground. Claire grabbed a rake, brandished it with shaking hands. "Leave us alone!" The men cursed, then one lunged at Crimson's stall. The horse reared in terror, smashing against the boards, wild-eyed. The first man struck at him with the crowbar, catching Crimson's flank. The horse shrieked, blood splattering the hay. "Stop it!" Evelyn screamed, rushing forward. The flashlight clattered to the floor. The intruders, startled by the chaos, dropped the crowbar and ran, melting into the darkness. Evelyn chased them to the edge of the yard, but they vanished. Panting, she hurried back inside. Claire was crouched beside Crimson, tears streaming down her face as she pressed her shirt against his wound. "I'm calling the sheriff," Claire said, voice trembling. "This isn't over." Evelyn knelt beside her, heart breaking. Crimson trembled, blood soaking the straw, but his eyes, those wild, terrified eyes, locked onto Evelyn's. She swore right then and there that she would fight for him with everything she had, and for the first time Claire didn't argue. The night stretched on, filled with fear and adrenaline. But beneath the fear, a new bond was forming, fragile but real, between mother, daughter, and horse. And outside, the dark Texas night pressed in, whispering that nothing would ever be the same. The barn smelled of fear and fresh blood as dawn seeped through the warped boards. Evelyn had barely closed her eyes all night. She watched over Crimson, listening to his uneven breathing, feeling the pulse of worry thudding in her chest. Every so often, Claire would come to the stall and look in, dark circles under her eyes, lips pressed in a tight line. They didn't speak much. There was nothing left to say after the chaos of the break-in. At first light, Evelyn called Dr. Rebecca Lynn, the local vet. Rebecca had been a family friend for years, the kind of no-nonsense woman who drove a battered blue truck and knew how to handle both panicked animals and panicked people. When she arrived, she took one look at Crimson's wound and swore softly under her breath. "This is bad, but he's tougher than he looks." "I'll need your help, both of you," Rebecca said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Claire hesitated at the stall door, but Evelyn beckoned her over. "You remember how to hold a flashlight?" "I guess I haven't forgotten everything," Claire mumbled, stepping inside. Crimson eyed them warily, but exhaustion seemed to have blunted his fear. Rebecca moved with practiced calm, cleaning the wound with gentle hands, explaining each step so Evelyn and Claire could follow along. They held buckets, passed bandages, whispered words of encouragement. For the first time in years, the three women worked together with a single purpose. "He's lost some blood, but he'll pull through if we keep the wound clean and watch for infection." Rebecca packed up her supplies, then paused. "Someone meant to hurt him. You need to keep him safe and yourselves too." Evelyn nodded, a knot tightening in her gut. "I'll do whatever it takes." After Rebecca left, Evelyn and Claire set about making the barn more secure. They hammered boards over broken windows, checked the locks on every door, and put up new lights around the yard. It wasn't just about keeping out intruders. It was about reclaiming their sense of safety, one stubborn nail at a time. When the chores were done, Claire lingered in the barn. She watched Crimson, who stood with his head lowered, occasionally flicking his ears at the faintest sound. "Why do you even care so much about this horse?" Claire asked, her voice tired, not angry. Evelyn thought for a long moment. "Because he was thrown away, just like a lot of things around here, and because nobody else would." Claire leaned against the stall, arms folded. "You always were stubborn." Evelyn almost smiled. "You get that from me." Silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable, but not as raw as before. Crimson shuffled closer, drawn by the quiet. Claire reached out, moving slow, her hand trembling just a little. This time the horse didn't pull away. He sniffed her palm, then let her brush his forelock, his breath warm and soft. "That's it. See, you're not so scary," Claire whispered. They spent the next few hours caring for Crimson, taking turns cleaning his wound and offering small treats. Apple slices, carrots, gentle words. Crimson, still wary, began to accept their presence. When Evelyn brought fresh hay, he nudged her hand, searching for another sugar cube. The ranch felt different that afternoon. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had dulled, replaced by a fragile sense of togetherness. Claire, restless and used to city chaos, found herself falling into the rhythm of ranch life, sweeping the barn, helping her mother check fences, making lists of things they needed from town. At one point, Claire found Evelyn sitting on the porch, staring at the distant hills, her face shadowed by memories. "Mom, do you ever regret staying here?" Claire asked, her tone soft. Evelyn took a long breath, considering. "Sometimes, but I made my choice, and I wouldn't have left your father behind, or this land. Even now, I think there's still something here worth saving." Claire looked away, the words hitting closer than she wanted to admit. Later, as the sun dipped low, Claire tried again with Crimson. She entered the stall, moving slowly, crouching to his level. He snorted, but didn't bolt. She placed a halter on him, awkward but determined. Evelyn watched from the doorway, pride and hope swelling in her chest. "Want to take him out for some air?" Evelyn offered. "Yeah, okay," Claire replied, surprised by her own eagerness. Together, they led Crimson into the paddock. He limped, still tender, but the open space seemed to lift his spirits. He nibbled at the grass, ears perked as he watched a pair of barn swallows swoop overhead. "He's kinda beautiful," Claire said, almost to herself. "He is," Evelyn agreed, voice thick with emotion. They stood together in the golden light, watching the horse graze. For the first time in a long while, it felt like something broken was starting to mend. Not just Crimson's wounds, but something between mother and daughter as well. That night, Evelyn made dinner: roast chicken, fresh bread, and sweet tea. Claire helped set the table, both of them moving around each other with the awkwardness of people relearning an old dance. Over the meal, they shared small stories, memories of Jack, tales of Claire's time in the city, dreams and regrets whispered between bites. Later, Evelyn sat by Claire's old bedroom door, just listening to the sound of her daughter breathing. Down in the barn, Crimson shifted, safe and cared for, the nightmare of the night before slowly receding into memory. In the darkness, Evelyn closed her eyes and let herself believe just for a moment that they might all be finding their way home, step by halting step, together. Morning in Blanco came quietly, the sky tinged pink and gold as the sun slipped above the low hills. For the first time in months, Evelyn Monroe woke to something besides dread. The old house seemed lighter somehow, the silence less suffocating, filled instead with the soft promise of a new day. She moved through the kitchen, brewing coffee, cracking eggs into a skillet, the rituals anchoring her to the present. From the hallway, Claire emerged, her hair mussed, wearing an oversized t-shirt she must have dug out from the back of her childhood closet. For a moment, Evelyn was startled by how young she looked. "Morning," Evelyn said, keeping her voice easy, careful not to break the fragile peace they'd found. "Morning," Claire replied, sliding into a chair at the table. She accepted a mug of coffee, wrapping her hands around it like it was the last warm thing in the world. They ate together in silence, the only sound the click of utensils and the occasional trill of a mockingbird outside the window. When breakfast was over, Claire stood, plate in hand. "I'll wash," she said, a small gesture, but one that meant the world to Evelyn. They settled into a quiet routine. After chores inside, they moved out to the barn, finding Crimson awake and alert, ears swiveling as they entered. His wound was healing well, thanks to Dr. Lynn's expert stitches and their careful tending. The bleeding had stopped, the edges of the gash puckering with new skin. Evelyn cleaned the injury while Claire held the lead rope, murmuring softly, "Easy, boy. Good job, Crimson." Afterward, they led him into the paddock for a short walk, letting him feel the soft grass beneath his hooves. The air was fresh, the sun warm on their backs, and for a while, all three could almost pretend the troubles of the world had vanished. Claire looked out at the sprawling fields, the distant shape of the old windmill spinning lazily. "I forgot how quiet it is here. You can actually hear yourself think." Evelyn smiled, her eyes tracing the lines of the land she'd tended for decades. "Your father loved this time of day. He used to say the light made everything seem possible again." Claire's face softened. "I miss him, Mom." "Me too." They walked in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Evelyn finally broke it. "You know, I made a lot of mistakes with you after he passed. I didn't know how to hold everything together, I'm sorry, Claire. Claire hesitated, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. I wasn't exactly easy to live with either. I kept running from everything, even you. I thought if I could just start over somewhere else, I wouldn't have to deal with all of this. Evelyn stopped, looking at her daughter squarely for the first time in a long while. Sometimes the hardest thing is staying put and facing the pain, but I think it's worth it, if it means not losing what matters. Claire nodded, blinking back tears. I'm trying, Mom. I really am. A red-tailed hawk soared overhead, its shadow gliding across the field. Crimson lifted his head, ears forward, curious. Claire reached out, stroking his neck. He's different than I expected, Claire admitted. He's gentle under all that fear. Evelyn watched them, her heart swelling. He just needed someone to see him. Sometimes that's all any of us need. Over the next few days, their routine deepened. Each sunrise brought new, small victories. Crimson eating with more appetite, allowing them to brush his coat and clean his hooves. He watched them with growing trust, even nudging Claire for treats. When he nickered softly as Evelyn approached, she felt a flicker of joy she hadn't known in years. They tackled chores together, mending fences, pulling weeds, tending the neglected vegetable patch out back. Claire joked about her soft city hands, but she threw herself into the work, mud streaking her jeans, laughter slipping out in unexpected moments. Evelyn, too, found herself loosening, telling stories about the early days with Jack, about old neighbors and storms weathered together. For the first time, Claire listened, asking questions, hungry for family history she'd once scorned. One afternoon, as they rested in the shade, Claire leaned against her mother's shoulder. What happens next, Mom? I mean, with the ranch? With us? Evelyn considered, feeling the weight and hope of the question. I don't know, honey. But I think if we stick together, we can figure it out. This place, it's got a lot of heart left. And so do we. Crimson wandered over, nudging Claire's pocket for another slice of apple. She giggled, feeding him, then ran her hand over his forehead. I think he likes us. I think he's starting to believe he belongs, Evelyn replied, voice thick. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky orange and purple, the three stood together by the fence. The wind carried the scent of clover, the first hints of autumn hidden beneath the heat of late summer. For the first time in what felt like forever, the ranch felt like home again. Inside, as darkness settled, Evelyn pulled out an old photo album, sharing pictures of Jack and baby Claire, horses long gone, summer picnics by the creek. Claire leaned in close, pointing at faces she barely remembered, asking for stories, for details Evelyn had never shared. The night filled with quiet laughter and memories, the house warm with a sense of family restored. Crimson wickered softly in the barn, content and safe, his presence binding mother and daughter in a fragile, growing trust. And outside, under the wide Texas sky, hope returned, slowly, quietly, but unmistakably, at sunrise and after. The Texas summer deepened, the land shimmering beneath waves of heat. By now, Crimson's wound had scabbed over and his coat shone red gold under the sun. Claire and Evelyn, once like two strangers in an empty house, now moved through their days almost in step, sharing chores, laughter, even the hard silences that came with old wounds. It was during this fragile time of healing that the threats began. The first sign was so small, Evelyn almost missed it. She was mending a section of fence near the back pasture when she found the wire slashed. Clean, deliberate, not the work of an animal. The post beside it bore a strange mark, a crudely scratched X. She stared at it, sweat beading on her brow, a knot tightening in her chest. At first, she said nothing, fixing the fence in silence, but the unease followed her all day, making her skin prickle. 2 nights later, the water pump outside the barn sputtered and died. Evelyn thought it was just old age, but when she and Claire hauled buckets to the well, she spotted the telltale gouges in the metal. Someone had sabotaged it. Water pooled at her boots, reflecting the worried lines of her face. Claire frowned. "You think this is about Crimson?" Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't have to. That night, a folded note appeared under the front door. The paper was rough, the words scrawled in thick black marker. "Give the horse back. This is your only warning." Claire's hand shook as she read it. This is insane. Why would anyone want him so badly? He's just a rescue, Mom. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Not just a rescue. Not with the way they hurt him. Worry hung heavy in the house, growing each day like a storm building on the horizon. Evelyn decided it was time to call the law. Sheriff Riley Easton, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and the slow, deliberate manner of someone who'd seen more than his share of trouble, arrived by midday. He tipped his hat, taking in the ranch with a practiced eye. "Evelyn, Claire, let's have a look at that note and the fence too," he said. Riley listened to everything, jotting notes, his expression unreadable. He walked the perimeter, inspecting the slashed wire and busted pump. When he stopped in front of Crimson's stall, the horse shied back, eyes rolling. Riley crouched, peering at the horse's left flank. "What's this here? That's not a normal scar." Evelyn peered over his shoulder. There, beneath the healing wound, a brand had begun to show through as the hair regrew. It was crude, just a double-bar cross, half-healed, angry red against Crimson's skin. Riley whistled low. "I've seen marks like that before. Illegal outfits, moving stolen livestock through these counties. You ever hear of Harlan Beck?" Evelyn's stomach turned at the name. Beck was a local legend, cattle trader, always skirting the law, rumored to be at the center of more than one animal cruelty investigation. She'd heard stories of horses vanishing, showing up months later across state lines, changed but still carrying the old pain in their eyes. Claire's voice was tight. "You think Beck wants Crimson back?" "Maybe. Or maybe someone else does, and they don't care who gets hurt." "I'll open an official investigation," Riley said. "But keep your doors locked and call if anything else happens." The tension changed the rhythm of ranch life. Evelyn and Claire double-checked every window at night, left lights burning on the porch. Crimson's recovery slowed. He grew skittish, startling at shadows, pacing his stall when the wind rattled the barn doors. Claire stayed up late in the hayloft, reading by flashlight, unwilling to let him be alone. A few days later, Dr. Lynn arrived for a follow-up. She wore her usual jeans and boots, her face set with concern. As she inspected Crimson's side, she frowned. This branding, it was meant to hide something, not just mark him. There's an old mark underneath, see? Looks like it's been burned over. She pulled out her phone, snapped photos, and checked her records. Her eyes narrowed. There's been a string of missing horses matching Crimson's color and build. Most folks thought they'd been sold off, but now, I think he's part of a larger ring. Someone's been trying to cover their tracks. Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. What should we do? Rebecca looked them both in the eye. You protect him, and you don't back down. I'll turn this over to the Animal Welfare Task Force. Maybe it's time Beck and his people answer for what they've done. The days crawled by, each one heavier than the last. News of the trouble spread through town. Some neighbors offered help. Extra eyes at night, a shotgun to borrow, even a batch of homemade pie left on the porch as a silent show of support. Others kept their distance, worried about getting caught in Beck's crosshairs. Late one evening, as thunder rumbled far off and heat lightning flickered on the horizon, Evelyn sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the note. She wondered if she was strong enough for what lay ahead. Then she heard Claire's voice from the doorway. "I'm scared, Mom. But I'm not running. Not this time." Evelyn reached for her daughter's hand, squeezing tight. "Neither am I." In the barn, Crimson nickered softly, as if he understood they were all in this together, tangled in a fight bigger than any of them had asked for. And outside, in the thickening dark, unseen eyes watched, waiting for their chance to strike. Thunderclouds rolled in from the west, the sky turning heavy and dark above the Monroe Ranch. For days, Evelyn and Claire had lived in a state of uneasy vigilance, jumping at every unexpected sound, casting nervous glances toward the horizon whenever a car passed by. Fear crept in with the dusk, lingering even in daylight. But there was something different now, a resolve that hadn't existed before, a sense that giving up was no longer an option. That morning, Evelyn woke to find Crimson standing at the gate, head high, nostrils flaring at the fresh wind. She ran her hand along his neck, feeling the hard line of muscle and the scars that marked his past. "You're not alone," she whispered, as much to herself as to the horse. Not anymore. Inside the house, Claire stood at the sink, staring out at the fields, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug. She was quieter these days, her anger replaced by a simmering determination that looked a lot like her mother's. When Evelyn joined her, Claire spoke without turning. "Do you really think Beck will come here?" Evelyn set her hand on Claire's shoulder, grounding them both. "I don't know, but I know we're not backing down." They spent the day reinforcing what they could, adding more boards to the barn windows, checking every latch and lock, testing the old generator in case someone tried to cut the power. Sheriff Riley stopped by, patrol lights flickering in the drive. "I got a deputy parked a mile down the road just in case," Riley said, leaning against his cruiser. "Beck's got eyes everywhere, but so do we. Call me if anything seems off. Don't play hero, Evelyn." She nodded, gratitude flickering in her tired eyes. "Thank you, Riley. I won't do anything foolish, at least not without backup." As dusk settled, the first real rain in weeks began to fall, pounding the tin roof and washing the dust from the yard. Evelyn found herself standing at the barn window, watching water bead on Crimson's back. She saw something in his posture, a stubbornness, a refusal to give in, that matched her own. Inside, Claire set the table for dinner, glancing at her mother with a mixture of fear and admiration. "I used to think you were crazy for sticking it out here. Now I get it. This place, it matters." Evelyn smiled, a weary curve of her lips. Sometimes courage just means staying when it'd be easier to run. They ate in near silence, thunder rumbling close. Suddenly, a truck's engine growled up the driveway, its headlights slicing through the rain. Evelyn and Claire exchanged a glance, dread coiling in their stomachs. Evelyn slipped her hand under the table, feeling for the old revolver she kept in the drawer. A heavy knock rattled the front door. Evelyn moved first, Claire close behind. She opened the door just a crack, rain blowing in sideways. On the porch stood Harlan Beck himself, a thick-set man in a mud-streaked coat, eyes cold as river stones. Two men waited behind him, their faces hidden in shadow. "Evening, Mrs. Monroe," Beck drawled, his voice slick as oil. "Mind if I come in? Looks like you and I got business." Evelyn's spine straightened. "We've got nothing to discuss." Beck smiled, not kindly. "I think we do. See? You got something in that barn of yours belongs to me, and I don't like folks keeping what ain't theirs." Claire stepped forward, voice shaking but defiant. "Crimson isn't yours. You abused him. You branded him and left him for dead. You don't deserve to own a goldfish, let alone a horse." Beck's smile faded. "Careful, girl. The world ain't fair to troublemakers. Tell you what. How about I take the horse off your hands, and we all forget this happened? I'll even throw in a little hush money for your trouble." He pulled a fat envelope from his coat, waving it like bait. Rain splattered the bills inside, the money as dirty as the hands offering it. Evelyn didn't hesitate. "You can take your money and leave, Beck. I won't be bought. Not by you, not by anyone." His eyes hardened, lips curling in contempt. "You think you're some kind of hero? This isn't about you, lady. You're making a mistake." "Maybe," Evelyn said, her voice low and steady. "But it's my mistake to make." For a long, tense moment, Beck said nothing. Then he shrugged, tucking the envelope back into his coat. "Have it your way, but don't say I didn't warn you." He turned, stalking down the steps, his men trailing behind. One of them spat in the dirt, locking eyes with Claire. "We'll be seeing you real soon." The truck roared away, tires spitting gravel. Evelyn closed the door with shaking hands, bracing her back against the wood. Claire slumped onto the stairs, her bravado spent. "Are we in over our heads?" Claire whispered. Evelyn knelt beside her. "Maybe, but sometimes standing up is all you can do." Thunder cracked above, rattling the windows. In the barn, Crimson stomped and snorted, sensing the tension in the air. Evelyn and Claire sat together on the stairs, neither willing to leave the other's side, hearts pounding in unison. The rain fell harder, the storm swelling around them. But inside that little farmhouse, something solid had taken root. Bravery, born not of certainty, but of love. And outside, in the dark, the real battle was only just beginning. The rain had barely stopped by midnight, leaving puddles in the yard and a nervous charge in the air. Evelyn checked the locks for the third time, her hands trembling. Claire sat by the kitchen window, clutching a flashlight, her knuckles white. Even Crimson sensed something was wrong. He paced in his stall, snorting, eyes fixed on the barn door as if he could smell trouble coming. Outside, the darkness was thick and complete. It was the kind of night when every creak of wood or whisper of wind set nerves on edge. But this time, Evelyn knew the threat wasn't just in her mind. It was real, and it was coming. Just past 2 a.m, a car's headlights flickered at the far end of the drive. Evelyn saw the flash through the curtains and felt her breath catch. She nudged Claire. "Get your phone. Call Sheriff Riley now." Claire fumbled for her phone, her fingers slick with sweat. "Hurry, Mom, hurry!" Evelyn grabbed the old revolver from the drawer and a heavy flashlight, then slipped out the back door. The wet grass squelched under her boots as she moved toward the barn, heart hammering against her ribs. She heard footsteps, several, moving fast through the mud. Then men's voices, low and urgent. Beck's men, she thought, her jaw tightening. She ducked behind a pile of feed sacks, peering into the gloom. 2 men circled the barn, flashlights sweeping over doors and windows. One of them stopped at Crimson's stall and tried the latch. The horse shrieked and reared, hooves thundering against the boards. The men cursed, fumbling with a crowbar. Evelyn stood, her voice clear and sharp. "Get away from my horse!" The beam of her flashlight hit the intruders square in the face. The men froze. For a heartbeat, everything went silent, except for Crimson's panicked snorts. Claire's voice rang out from the house, trembling but loud. "The police are on their way. Leave us alone." The men hesitated, but then a third figure stepped from the shadows. It was Beck himself, raincoat flapping, pistol gleaming in his hand. "Enough," he snapped. "Grab the horse, move." Evelyn's hands shook, but she aimed the revolver steady. "Take one more step, and you'll regret it." For a moment, Beck just laughed. "Lady, you don't have it in you." But something in Evelyn's eyes made even him pause. Her shoulders squared, eyes full of stubborn fire. "I told you, I'm not letting you hurt him ever again." Crimson crashed against the stall door, eyes rolling, foam flying from his mouth. Suddenly, Claire burst out of the house, wielding a rake like a lance. "Get away from my family!" One of Beck's men lunged, trying to grab Claire, but she jabbed him in the ribs. He stumbled back, cursing. Evelyn pulled the trigger. The gun roared, sending a bullet into the dirt inches from Beck's boot. He jerked back, face twisted in rage. "Enough!" Beck shouted. "Get the horse, or you're all done!" Suddenly, Sheriff Riley's patrol lights flashed at the end of the drive, siren howling in the stillness. Beck's men scattered, running for the trees. Beck fired his pistol at the sheriff's car, glass shattering. Riley and his deputy leaped out, guns drawn. "Drop your weapon, Beck!" "Now." Beck hesitated, then tossed his pistol aside. The deputy wrestled him to the ground, cuffs snapping around his wrists. Claire rushed to Evelyn's side, tears streaming down her face. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Evelyn wrapped her arms around her daughter, shaking with adrenaline and relief. "I'm fine. We did it. We really did it." Crimson, still wild-eyed, backed into the far corner of his stall. Claire went to him, stroking his nose, whispering soothing words until he quieted. The horse pressed his head against her shoulder, shivering, but alive. Sheriff Riley strode over, his face grim but relieved. "You two held your own. Beck won't bother you again. We got plenty of evidence. Between Dr. Lynn's photos and the branding marks, there'll be a reckoning." The deputy hauled Beck and his men toward the cruiser. Beck spat at the ground, glaring at Evelyn. "This isn't over," he snarled. Riley just shook his head. "For you, it is." Neighbors, woken by the siren, gathered at the edge of the property, flashlights bobbing in the dark, faces pale with shock. One by one, they offered help, blankets, even strong words of support. For years, Evelyn had felt isolated and judged, but tonight, the community rallied around her. As the patrol cars rolled away and dawn began to break, Evelyn stood beside Claire in the quiet aftermath. The barn was battered, the yard a muddy mess, but the feeling of victory was undeniable. Claire squeezed her mother's hand. "You're the bravest person I know." Evelyn smiled through tears. "I couldn't have done it without you, or Crimson." Together they led Crimson into the sunlight, his coat shining as if cleansed by the storm. For the first time, his eyes looked soft, almost grateful, as if he understood the fight had been for him as much as for themselves. The worst of the night was over, but as the first rays of sunlight touched the ranch, Evelyn knew, so was their loneliness. They were family again, with a future finally within reach. The news of Beck's arrest spread through Blanco like wildfire. For days after the standoff, the Monroe Ranch became the talk of the county. People stopped by, some to bring pies or casseroles, others just to shake Evelyn's hand, offer hugs, or say, "You did the right thing, ma'am. We're proud of you." But it wasn't just kindness and casseroles that arrived in the wake of that stormy night. It was hope. For the first time in years, Evelyn saw her neighbors not just as distant faces, but as friends, people who cared, who wanted to help, who believed in standing up for what was right. The investigation that followed uncovered far more than anyone expected. Dr. Lynn worked late into the evenings with local deputies and the Animal Welfare Task Force, combing through evidence collected from the ranch and Beck's seized trucks. The brand on Crimson's flank matched those found on dozens of other horses reported missing over the past year. Beck's ledger, sloppily kept but damning, was full of coded transactions and names of other ranches victimized by his ring. Within a week, officers rescued more than 30 abused and stolen horses from hidden pastures across the county. The images of skinny, scarred Mustangs, some so frightened they had to be coaxed with gentle hands and soft words, appeared on every TV in Texas. Evelyn watched the news, tears streaming down her face as each battered animal was led to safety. She looked at Crimson, standing in the sunlight just outside the kitchen window, his chestnut coat gleaming, scars still visible but healing. She felt pride like she hadn't in years. "You did it, boy," she whispered. "You brought us all together." Sheriff Riley visited nearly every day, always with updates and words of encouragement. "The whole county owes you, Evelyn," he said one afternoon. "Without your courage, we might never have broken up that ring. Folks are saying you're a hero." Evelyn shook her head, humbled. "I'm just a woman trying to keep her promise. To my husband, to my daughter, to a horse no one else wanted." Claire, too, changed. The bitter edge that had followed her back from the city softened. She was no longer a restless guest. She was Evelyn's partner, her co-conspirator, and once again, her daughter. Together, they fixed what the storm had battered. New boards for the barn, fresh paint on the porch, laughter in the kitchen. Sometimes Claire would sneak out at dawn to brush Crimson and talk to him, her voice carrying through the quiet, as if sharing secrets with an old friend. One morning, a group of high school kids and their parents arrived in pickups and SUVs, offering to help rebuild fences and clean up debris. They worked shoulder to shoulder with Evelyn and Claire, some of them city kids who'd never held a hammer, others farm kids who knew the land. By evening, the ranch looked better than it had in years. Dr. Lynn stood with Evelyn at the edge of the paddock, watching the newly rescued horses graze. "You've given them a safe place, Evelyn. Not just the horses, people too." Evelyn smiled, feeling the truth in her words. "I guess this old ranch still has some good left in it." Inspired by Evelyn's stand, local businesses and churches pooled funds to launch a new rescue program. The Monroe Ranch became its beating heart, a haven for neglected horses and a place where troubled kids could volunteer, learn to care for animals, and find meaning in the simple work of barn and field. One Saturday, the community threw a barbecue in the Monroes' honor. The smell of grilled meat and sweet corn filled the air. Neighbors brought homemade pies, musicians strummed guitars on the porch, and children chased each other through the tall grass. Evelyn, for the first time in years, felt herself relax, surrounded by warmth and belonging. Sheriff Riley raised a glass. "Here's to Evelyn Monroe and her family, for showing us all what courage looks like. And here's to Crimson, the horse who proved that second chances can change the world. The crowd cheered, laughter and applause echoing across the fields. Crimson, the star of the afternoon, was led out into the yard. His scars stood out in the sunlight, but so did his spirit. Calm, proud, a living symbol of hope and endurance. Children petted his neck and whispered to him, as if they too understood his journey. As twilight settled, Evelyn found herself sitting on the porch steps beside Claire, looking out over the glowing lanterns strung across the yard. "I never thought we'd come back from this," Claire murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "We didn't just come back," Evelyn replied, her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "We built something better." Claire smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. "I think I want to stay, Mom, for good. Help you run this place, help the horses, help the people too." Evelyn hugged her tight. "I'd like that more than anything." The night grew quiet, the stars bright above, the ranch alive with the sounds of community, a place transformed by the bravery of a few, the kindness of many, and the endurance of a horse who'd been given one more chance. In that moment, Evelyn realized the greatest victory wasn't defeating Beck or even saving Crimson. It was rediscovering the power of hope, family, and the unbreakable strength that comes from standing together. And as the last lantern flickered in the Texas night, Evelyn Monroe, once the outcast of the auction, knew she and her ranch had finally come home. The seasons began to shift, the thick summer heat giving way to cooler air and early sunsets. With Beck behind bars and the ranch bustling with new life, the Monroe place felt transformed, a far cry from the lonely outpost it had been just weeks before. The barn, once a symbol of pain and struggle, now echoed with laughter and the steady rhythms of healing. It was Dr. Lynn who suggested the community gathering, a way to celebrate the rescue horses, thank the volunteers, and share the story that had inspired so many. Flyers went up in town, and before long, the event had taken on a life of its own. On the day of the gathering, the ranch was alive with people. Cars lined the gravel driveway, children played tag beneath the oaks, and neighbors brought casseroles, lemonade, and folding chairs. A local band set up near the porch, filling the air with old country tunes. The rescued horses, healthier now, grazed contentedly in the paddock, watched by new friends and would-be adopters. Evelyn stood near the barn, watching as Claire greeted newcomers and showed them around. She was proud of her daughter, proud of the strong, kind woman she had become. There had been a time when Evelyn feared their rift would never heal, but now, looking at Claire, she saw hope reborn. At noon, Sheriff Riley stepped up onto the porch with a microphone in hand. "Folks, can I get your attention?" The crowd quieted, turning toward him. "We're here today because this community stood up for what's right, because people like Evelyn Monroe showed us the meaning of compassion and courage. Evelyn, would you come up and say a few words?" Evelyn hesitated, nerves fluttering in her chest. Public speaking was never her strength, but as she looked at the sea of faces, neighbors, friends, children, even the battered horses who'd found sanctuary here, she felt something steady her. She squeezed Claire's hand, then made her way up the steps. She cleared her throat, her voice soft, but growing stronger with every word. "I'm not much for speeches, so I'll just tell you what's in my heart. A few months ago, I was lost. I'd buried my husband, nearly lost my daughter, and was ready to give up on this place, on myself even. Then I saw a horse no one else wanted, and something inside me just wouldn't let go. Crimson and I, we were both beaten up, both left behind. Maybe that's why I understood him. She paused, searching the faces before her. It would have been easy to turn away. It always is. But sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing. Compassion doesn't always look like grand gestures. Sometimes it's just not giving up. On a horse, on a person, or on a dream. She glanced at Claire, who was openly crying now, and smiled through her own tears. I've learned a lot these past few weeks. That courage isn't just standing up to bad people. It's facing the fear inside you, too. The fear that you're not enough, that it's too late, or that you can't forgive. But healing comes from facing those fears, by loving when it's hard, by staying when it's easier to run. The crowd was silent, many dabbing their eyes. Evelyn continued, her voice resonant. This ranch is more than just land or fences or barns. It's a place for second chances, for horses like Crimson, for people like me and Claire, and for anyone who's ever felt lost. Redemption isn't something that just happens. It's something you build, choice by choice, every day. She looked out over the rescued horses, grazing quietly. Some people say a lost cause is a waste of time, but I don't believe that. I believe that giving one more chance, to an animal, a friend, even to yourself, can change everything. Crimson wasn't just saved. He saved us too. He brought my daughter home. He reminded me that kindness is never wasted. There was a long silence as Evelyn stepped down, the crowd moved by her words. Sheriff Riley squeezed her shoulder. Dr. Lynn wrapped her in a fierce hug. Even the tough ranchers wiped their eyes, pretending it was just dust in the air. Later, as the festivities continued, Evelyn found herself surrounded by volunteers and neighbors, all wanting to share their own stories, of struggle, of hope, of the redemptive power of compassion. Some had lost loved ones. Some had battled addiction or loneliness. Some just needed a reminder that no one was truly alone. Claire found her in the shade, handing her a glass of sweet tea. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. I wish Dad could see this." Evelyn smiled, the ache of missing Jack softened by the warmth around her. "I think he'd be proud of both of us." Together they watched as a group of kids led Crimson around the paddock, his gait steady, his eyes calm. He'd become a living symbol for the ranch, a reminder that healing was possible, no matter how rough the past. As evening fell and the last guests packed up, Evelyn walked out to the barn, the twilight cool on her skin. She leaned against the stall, running her hand down Crimson's neck. "Thank you," she whispered, "for teaching me what it means to keep trying, even when it hurts." Crimson nickered softly, pressing his head into her hand. In that simple gesture, Evelyn felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She stepped out into the dusk, heart full, believing now what she'd tried so hard to tell others, that love, given freely and stubbornly, could redeem even the hardest of stories. The lesson was simple, but profound. Never give up on what's worth loving, no matter how broken it seems. Sometimes, the smallest acts of compassion could heal not just a horse or a family, but a whole community. And in that moment, Evelyn knew she was finally home. Months slipped by, marked by the changing seasons and the steady thrum of new life at the Monroe Ranch. The days no longer bled into one another with the gray monotony of survival. Instead, each morning arrived full of purpose. By autumn, the hills around Blanco glowed gold, and the fields whispered with wind and promise. The Monroe Ranch had changed, inside and out. The barns, once battered by storms and sorrow, were repaired and painted, a patchwork of old wood and new, but stronger than ever. The paddocks bustled with rescued horses. Mustangs, paint mares, Appaloosa colts, all slowly coming back to health under Dr. Lynn's watchful eye and the gentle hands of volunteers. But the biggest change was inside the house. Evelyn had always thought of the ranch as Jack's legacy, a thing she'd struggled to preserve for his sake. Now, as she moved through the kitchen in the morning, smelling fresh bread and hearing laughter down the hall, she realized it had become something new, a place not just to remember the past, but to build a future. Claire, once restless and angry, now flourished. She took over the youth program that had grown out of their rescue work, teaching local kids, some from troubled homes, others just needing somewhere to belong, how to care for horses, mend fences, and trust their own hands. Claire's sharp humor and honesty made her a favorite among the kids. Her own story gave them hope that broken things could mend. Dr. Lynn visited almost every day, working with new arrivals and training young volunteers. The vet's no-nonsense style hit a huge heart, and she and Claire soon became close friends. Together, they developed educational programs for schools and aftercare for at-risk teens, using the horses as teachers, each one with a scar, a story, and a lesson about resilience. Sheriff Riley stopped by often, usually on his way home after a long shift, leaning on the fence to talk about the latest town gossip or just to check in. The community, once hesitant and distant, now brought food, donations, and willing hands. Evelyn, Claire, Dr. Lynn, and Riley, along with a growing network of neighbors, became the guardians of something larger than themselves. Each morning, Evelyn and Crimson led trail rides at dawn for new volunteers and the kids. The old gelding had become the heart of the ranch, a living reminder that hope, once sparked, could burn away the deepest darkness. Children who had never trusted anyone before learned to trust him, feeding him apples and running their hands down his scarred flank. On crisp October mornings, the ranch would be alive with the sounds of young voices, horses nickering, and the steady rhythm of life restored. The days were busy. Feeding, mucking stalls, riding lessons, therapy sessions for kids who needed more than words could give. At night, the house glowed with laughter and music, the kind of warmth Evelyn once thought she'd lost forever. One evening, as the last light faded and the hills turned to blue shadows, Evelyn stood by the paddock with Claire, watching the horses graze. The smell of hay and earth drifted in the cool air. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Claire asked, her voice quiet. Evelyn smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Not anymore. There was a time when I thought all I had left was memory. But now, I feel like I'm exactly where I belong." Claire nudged her gently. "You built all this, you know. It's not just Dad's legacy. It's yours." Evelyn looked out at the fields, at the barn lights twinkling in the dark, at the kids laughing near the fence, and the volunteers leading Crimson into the barn for the night. "Maybe it's both," she said softly. "Maybe what we love survives, as long as we don't give up on it." That weekend, the ranch held its first Second Chances Festival. Families came from towns all over the county. There were pony rides, home-cooked meals, and a small ceremony to dedicate the Monroe Ranch as an official sanctuary for both horses and youth. Claire gave a speech, her voice steady and proud, speaking of her journey home and the healing that came not just to her, but to everyone who stepped onto the land. Dr. Lynn presented Evelyn with a plaque, etched with Crimson's likeness and the words, "For those who believe in second chances." During the ceremony, Evelyn took the microphone, her hands steady as she looked out over the gathered crowd. She spoke about the lessons she'd learned, her voice strong. Sometimes, saving just one life, horse or human, can heal an entire family and inspire a community. Real courage means never giving up on what's worth loving, no matter how broken it seems. Thank you, all of you, for believing in us, for standing by us, for helping this ranch become a home for hope. The applause was thunderous, and Evelyn found herself in tears. Tears of gratitude, of joy, of release. Claire hugged her, Dr. Lynn squeezed her hand, and even Sheriff Riley tipped his hat, his eyes misty. That night, after the crowd had gone, Evelyn walked the paddock one last time. The stars burned bright above, and the land felt alive beneath her boots. She found Crimson standing at the fence, head high, his eyes soft and full of understanding. "We made it, boy," she whispered. "We really did." He nudged her gently, breath warm against her cheek. In that moment, Evelyn knew that no matter what the future held, droughts, storms, sorrow, or joy, she was no longer afraid. She and Claire had made something lasting, something that would endure after they were gone. Not just a ranch, but a legacy of love, hope, and stubborn, everyday courage. And as dawn crept over the hills, Evelyn and Crimson led the first ride of the morning, hoofbeats echoing across the fields, a promise that second chances would always have a home here. Sometimes, saving just one life can change the world. And sometimes, the love you give away is the love that saves you.